My name is George Benson. I'm the Dean of the Terry College. I'm pleased to see you all here this morning. Welcome to our Executive Education Center, which we've now been in for about a year and a half. I guess it's still new. Those of you who haven't been here before, we have about 25,000 square feet in this building. If you get a chance to look around, please do. The floor below us has some beautiful classrooms. The floor above us is offices, a conference room, a small classroom, kitchens, and other facilities. We've been so pleased with the facility that we're actually adding additional space. We've taken another 2,500 square feet, which we'll be building out later this fall. And we want to add another 60-seat tiered high-tech classroom, a small library, study area for students, and a few offices. So that is on the horizon. That should be up and running hopefully by the spring. Just to give you an example of some of the programs we've been having here, yesterday, not only did we have an advisory board meeting for our School of Accounting, but simultaneously we had a CFO roundtable, the Chief Financial Officers, and we had in this room for the first time. We've been doing it down in the classroom. It's a quarterly series that we put on, and it drew together yesterday, I guess about 65 or 70 CFOs from the Atlanta area. So it was a wonderful event. The topic was private equity and what private equity firms are doing in terms of buying and selling other organizations. And we had representatives from Kohlberg in New York City here on the panel, from Great Hill Properties in Boston, and another company called Arc Capita, based in Bahrain, but with an office here in Atlanta. They talked about private equity. It was a wonderful session. This has become a real networking event for chief financial officers in Atlanta. We have a year-end banquet coming up in November for that, and I just thought you'd like to know about some of the things that are happening here. The center has just made it possible. People are coming to us, opportunities are coming to us, and it's been remarkable for the Terry College and the University of Georgia. I'd like to, as always, recognize our sponsors, and particularly want to thank our newest sponsor. You can see the signs, and I guess on the tables as well. But Deloitte has signed on as a corporate sponsor for Terry Third Thursday, and I'd like to thank Ed Hayes. I don't think Ed is here, but Ed is on our Terry Alumni Board and is responsible for this sponsorship. And Ed is the Deputy Managing Partner of Deloitte's Atlanta office, and I know some of you know Ed. Also like to add my thanks to Bank of North Georgia, who joined us about a month ago as a new corporate sponsor. Kessel Stelling, another one of our alumni board members, is the president and COO of Bank of North Georgia. And I know we have some representatives here this morning, and if they would please stand. Right here they are. 3, 4, good. Thank you. Thank you all very much for what you're doing for us. Also, our two longtime media sponsors that you're all very familiar with by now, even whether you come to this event or not, the Atlanta Business Chronicle and Public Broadcasting Atlanta. And I want to thank both of them as well for their longtime support of this event. And I think Bill Chandler is here. Bill, here we are down here front. You're too close. You sit down, I can't see you. Thank you for all you're doing. And Harriet Hoskins Abrahall, I know Harriet is here. We chatted earlier. Harriet usually has something to say. Harriet, would you have a few words for the group?
I do. Not having any tangible. Not having any tangible assets like the Chronicle. We just have a lot of hot air. Good morning. I wanted to tell you about several programmatic items that would be of interest, perhaps. The first is a feature which we're doing tomorrow morning on Morning Edition on rather some dark, if blurred, hours in the history of this city. It's on the 100th anniversary of the Atlanta race riots, and it's something that everybody needs to hear. Is this working? Okay. Also, next month, I mentioned last month, we're having a very special month because we've resuscitated at PBS and locally a wonderful series called Eyes on the Prize, which is about the civil rights movement from the point of view of the common man. And building on this, we have got a lot of other vignettes, forums on radio, television, and on the website on the whole area of civil rights from the point of view of the common man. The companion book to that series was written by a man called Warren Williams, who's now senior correspondent with National Public Radio. You may have heard him. And he will be here for a special reception, which, if anyone would like to go to, please see me afterwards, October the 3rd at the History Centre, where, amongst other things, after the reception there will be a taping hosted by Valerie Jackson, Maynard Jackson's wife, who runs our book review program called Between the Lines. She will be interviewing him about his latest book. And then you may have heard about a new film coming out of Hollywood on Marie Antoinette. We have a companion documentary, if you like. Theirs is a drama, ours is a documentary. Both, I think, contain reenactments. But it's pretty interesting stuff. Thank you, George.
Yep. All right, thank you very much. Upcoming Terry Third Thursday events, October 19th, Bertus Downs will be with us, and Bertus is certainly known around the city of Athens for his work with REM, the rock band. He is their legal counsel. He's also an adjunct professor at the law school at the University of Georgia. And in his words, he's going to talk about an old war horse's guide to navigating turbulent times in the music industry. He has been a guest lecturer in our new music business program at the Terry College, which we do jointly with the Hodgins School of Music. And he is, I can tell you, enormously respected in the music industry. So this is one I think you don't want to miss. And in case you did miss it last weekend, REM was just inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame in a spectacular ceremony here in Atlanta. So it should be a very interesting event. Then November 16th, I mean, it just continues to get better. Atlanta City Council President Lisa Borders will be with us to talk about the state of government in the city of Atlanta. Then in December, as always, we take a break for a month and we start up again in January. And when we hit the ground running, we've got 3 sitting CEOs in a row. January, Martin Flanagan, CEO of MVestCap. February 15th is Richard Anthony, CEO of Synovus. And March 15th is Gary Betty, CEO of Earthlink. So it should be a real good start to the year, and hope you can make all those programs. I want to thank Richard Quartz IV and his committee, the task force for Terry Third Thursday, for helping to line up all of these speakers. They do a wonderful job, and we couldn't do this without them. You can register for the programs on our Terry website if you like, or you can see Jill Walton, who is our Director of Alumni Relations. Jill, I know you're out here somewhere. Where are you? There she is over there standing. Jill can certainly help you with that as well, particularly if you're interested in the season ticket, so you can get a ticket for the whole year. Homecoming tailgate, Jill would like me to mention that as well, is coming up. October 14th is homecoming at the University of Georgia. We will be having our usual tailgate on the lawn in front of Brooks Hall. Plenty of food, a band. Best part, Uga will be there. If you like your picture taken with Uga, please get there a little bit earlier rather than closer to game time, and we'll see if we can make that happen for you as well. Again, you can register on the website, or you can call our Alumni Relations office if you're interested in coming to that. Now, I'd like to, well, I guess one more thing I might mention as long as we're going on down the calendar. One thing to kind of put in the back of your mind for way out, it's May 5th. We're going to do a gala event here at the Westin Hotel. It will be a fundraiser for the Terry College with I'm telling you, a spectacular live auction that you are not going to believe the items that we are getting for this auction, as well as a typical silent auction. It should be a very, very special event. We've done 2 galas in the past. We did one in Athens, we did one at Reynolds Plantation, and we always tied it in with a golf tournament. This year we're focusing all of our attention on the gala, so we think it will be particularly special. So mark down May 5th, and we'd love to have you come to that event. All right, now let's get on to the main event why we're all here this morning. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Tom Glenn. Tom is chairman of the board of Ace Hardware Corporation. It's a position he was elected to by his fellow Ace Hardware retailers in 2003. He was first elected to the board of Ace in 1996. But the hardware business has been in his family bloodlines for now nearly a century. His grandfather opened his first hardware store in Chickamauga, Georgia in 1919. And Tom's father also served on the Ace's board before Tom from 1979 to 86. The family's business now operates 14 Ace Hardware stores from Knoxville on into North Georgia, basically centered around Chattanooga. And Tom has served as president of the family enterprise since 1987. Tom earned an MBA from Duke in 1984, but more importantly, got his undergraduate degree from a place called the Terry College of Business in 1981, and we're real proud of that, Tom. He and his wife, Darlene, are actively involved in the Chattanooga community. Tom serves as a board member and treasurer of the United Way of Chattanooga, as well as on the board of the National Center for Youth Issues, the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce, and the St. Nicholas Episcopal School. Now, I think we all know that ACE is the place with a helpful hardware man. It's a little early in the morning for me to sing that, but I now would like to give you the lead hardware man. Tom, come on up and join us. Tom Glenn.
I'm not going to sing it either. Well, it's certainly a privilege to be here with you today. And I had the honor and the privilege last night of also having dinner with the dean, and I got to learn more about his vision for the school. One thing that I am a proud graduate of the Terry School, and as I look at what has been accomplished, and I know what will continue to be accomplished at the Terry School, I'm just glad that I was there 20 years ago, because if I was that age today that I was back then, I probably wouldn't be in the Terry School, because I probably wouldn't be able to get in. But the rigor with which the standards are at the school are really impressive. I also I want to recognize, I got two friends here today that I grew up with at the University of Georgia. We were on the third floor of Reed Hall together, and these guys were great influences in my life. And I'm not going to characterize influence any further than that, but they were definitely influences in my life. So I'm going to talk about, this morning I want to talk about basically three different areas. A little bit about history of ACE, a little bit about the structure of ACE Hardware Corporation, which happens to be a cooperative, and then a little bit about retail strategy and where we see ourselves fitting. One thing about ACE, I went 2 or 3 days ago, I went out to the Wall Street Journal online, and I wanted to see, a lot of people don't understand ACE. They have some understanding of an ACE store that may be in their community, but the overall organization really don't have much understanding for that. So I went to the Wall Street Journal online to see, in the last 12 months, how many references to ACE hardware were in articles in the Wall Street Journal. And now I'm going to start on the other end and say the number of references to Walmart was 1,000 over the last 12 months. Now, I wasn't real sure if it was a round number, so I don't know if it just beyond 1,000 they don't keep track. But there were 1,000 references. I looked at Home Depot, there were 457 references. And I use Home Depot because they're obviously in our industry, don't go to market the same way that we do, but in our industry. 457 references in the last 365 days. Lowe's, 157 references in the Wall Street Journal. ACE Hardware, 12 references. So that gives you a little bit of perspective, too, about the fact that we're not out there generally. Within the industry, you would read a lot in trade magazines about ACE. But when you go beyond that, we're not really talked about much. And frankly, we don't have a problem with that. We kind of like being below the radar screen, and so that suits us pretty well. But that gives you a little bit. So I thought maybe I should talk a little bit about the history of ACE, just for understanding. But I really want to get to talk a little bit about the cooperative and then talk some about retail strategy. Okay. There we go. Year founded, 1924. ACE was founded in the Chicago area. That is where our corporate offices are, in Chicago. It was founded in 24. There were 4 gentlemen who got together. Back then, the fierce competition in retail, or the fear out there, was the big places like Sears and Montgomery Ward's and the catalogs and all that. So 4 gentlemen got together that were hardware retailers in Chicago and said, somehow we've got to buy more effectively. And the first purchase they made was a gross of sponges, and they split it up. And that was kind of the beginnings of this cooperative buying. From that point, though, ACE pretty much remained a regional, I'm going to say a distributor or buying entity until the 60s. Primarily in Chicago, we got to about 200, 300, maybe 300 plus stores. But I think part of the history of ACE that is interesting to this area, and a part that Georgia played in the history of ACE, is that there were a few retailers around the country that saw value in ACE in the buying. And by the 60s, ACE had a distribution center in Chicago and was actually serving beyond the Midwest area actually served a handful of retailers in Georgia, actually a handful in California. Surprisingly, even though the distance was that far, it still made economic sense for them to be members of ACE. But those retailers were not very satisfied. Back then, it took about 3 weeks. You would manually do an order in the store. You would mail the order to Chicago. They would pick it. They'd ship it down common carrier whenever they could arrange that. And so about a 3-week lead time compared to today, it's less than 48 hours. Of course, the stores ordered electronically, transmitted electronically, processed that way. And we get goods. We can even get goods in quicker than 48 hours. But these retailers were not very satisfied with that. And there was a gentleman, I don't know if anybody here knows or is from Washington, Georgia, but there was a gentleman from Washington, Georgia by the name of Virgil Poss who was real insistent that ACE needed to open a warehouse in the state of Georgia. And so we had an industry convention in Atlanta back in '68. And the gentleman who was CEO at ACE for 48 years, that's a little atypical nowadays to be CEO for that period of time, but he was CEO for 48 years. He agreed to have an audience with Virgil Poss. And so they had a discussion. Allegedly, Mr. Hesse was very reticent on the topic. And at the conclusion of the discussion, Mr. Poss asked Mr. Hesse, well, what do you think? And Mr. Hesse said, well, I'll eat your grits and I'll eat your collards, but we'll never have a warehouse in Georgia. And 3 years later, we did have a warehouse in Georgia. But I would say, and that was really the beginnings, that was in the early '70s, that was the beginnings of ACE becoming a national retailer as opposed to just a Midwest regional type retailer. At the same time, we opened a warehouse out in California. And that was really the opening of distribution centers was a significant platform of growth for ACE back then. And ACE was really just a distributor back then. It wasn't much about retail or about branding. Number of distribution centers, there are 14 across the country right now, including one in Gainesville, Georgia. That original Georgia warehouse was in Atlanta, but that's since been moved to Gainesville. And actually, we're opening our first warehouse in China will open next month. I was in China back in May. We were actually we moved our buying office to Shanghai, and we were also observing the facility that we were going to be occupying. But we have always serviced retailers across the world, but this is the first time that we're actually putting inventory internationally. So we're very excited about that. Number of countries, there's 70 countries that ACE has a presence in. Internationally, we're a little different than we are domestically. We do consider ourselves to have somewhat of a brand here domestically. Internationally, the ACE brand does have, it has recognition internationally, but we also have people, we're almost a distributor for some of our customers internationally where we just provide goods. Our biggest customers in Saudi Arabia has 22 stores, and they do a tremendous business. They have stores, they're opening a store next month. That's 100,000 square feet. That would be comparable in size to like one of the warehouse stores, although it's not a warehouse format. It looks more like a department store. 4,600 stores. There has been an evolution over time in stores. Again, ACE primarily was a distributor initially, but we've kind of morphed in the last few years into more of a retailer. What has happened is we'll put in about our budget this year is to put in 162 new stores, and we're on track to hit that budget. One thing that happens with franchises is that, and ACE is not technically a franchise, but one thing that does happen with franchises is there is some natural attrition in franchises. We look at the SBA has statistics for what you should expect in terms of attrition, and ACE is below, well, depending on how you look at it, above average. We have less attrition than most, but we do have some attrition in retail stores for various reasons, which could be succession issues or whatever in a store, that stores periodically go away. But one thing that has happened is that as we bring on new stores, there's much more emphasis on the ACE brand and making sure, and the standards, frankly, are higher with new stores than they are with stores that have been in the cooperative for a long time. So a store that signed an agreement 50 years ago does not have to meet certain standards that a store that signs today. As a result of some attrition, though, what we see corporately is, and what we help happen, is an intentional effort to increase the value of the brand because we think we have a strong brand, but we also know that we have some problem areas in the brand. In a sense, I don't want to make this too rosy. I don't want to sound unrealistic about this, but in a sense, the advent of the warehouse stores has helped the Ace brand insofar as they have helped us a little bit clean up some of the stores that maybe were not good fits for Ace today. At the same time, they've taken business, and I'm going to be realistic about that. But I would say in the long term, Ace is a better company because of the effect on our brand that it has, and actually helped us, we think, increase the value of the brand. If they wanted to go somewhere else, though, we'd be fine with that too. But we know we'll be competing with them for a long time. Number of SKUs, 65,000. Just put that up. We talk in our industry a lot about the number of stock keeping units. Now, we have access to a million plus stock keeping units, but this is what's actually in our warehouses, the 14 warehouses across the country. And the importance of that is that our supply chain is so tight with the warehouses that, of course, we can get goods, we can replenish very, very quickly. Now, we also retailers will buy directly from our manufacturers, and so that gives us access to even more stock keeping units than that. But this is mainly an issue of service. Having those that close to the retail site is very valuable to us in the warehouse. We are intentionally what you call a two-step system. We don't, although we bring a lot of goods direct in, we intentionally use this warehouse system. Retail sales, $13 billion, and that Ace is one of the top 25 retailers in the United States, one of the top 50 globally. We normally are not recognized as that because if you were to look in business periodicals, and if there happened to be anything about Ace, it would be more about what we call the wholesale side, what the corporation sells to the retailers as opposed to what the retailers sell to the consumers. But when you actually do the math and figure out what the retailers sell to the consumers, we're a $13 billion company. I wanted to talk just a couple of minutes about the cooperative structure. We like to say that Ace is, and when we go out to sell Ace to people who might be interested in opening an Ace store, we characterize ourselves as the unfranchised. And essentially what that means, just hit a few points right here, is that because we are a cooperative, Ace is owned by the retailers, of which I represent the retailers, as the dean said. And although my job is pretty much full-time with Ace Corporation, we are retailers as well. But because we own the corporation, one of the things that we don't deal with is as much as this issue right here of conflicts between what I'm saying is the franchisee and the franchisor, although technically we're not. We are members of Ace Hardware, members of the cooperative, and we sign a membership agreement as opposed to a franchise agreement. But still, most people think of us as franchises, and that's a fair way to think about it. But what we don't have, when we look at Ace, there is, and well, if you look at a franchisor and you look at the entire enterprise, at the end of the day, there is so much profit that the enterprise generates. And the question at the end of the day is, how do you split the profit? How much does the franchisee end up with, and how much does the franchisor end up with? And normally the franchisor, I would say, obviously it's got to make economic sense for both parties, but the franchisor normally, I guess this is arguable, but probably has the balance of power in that relationship. But the economics have to work. But for us, at the end of the day, the enterprise, the profitability of the enterprise, there is so much that's left with the retailer, but whatever's left over with the corporation gets split among the retailers then. So at the end of the day, the profit of the enterprise all flows back to the retailer. Now, you could make the argument, and as an Ace retailer, I'd still probably rather have all of my profit reside. I'd rather have it all and the corporation have $0 at the end of the year. And the reason for that is because I know if the dollar that I earn is taxed by the corporation, that's going to get split among 3,600 stockholders. If I'm a top performing store, I would probably normally get a higher % of that dollar than just averaged out across 3,600 different retailers. But that's kind of splitting this maybe and dissecting this a little bit too far. Most retailers don't think that way. And so that's the point of there's really not, there is a much lower degree of conflict in our organization than there would be among a franchisor with the franchisees. That's not to say that there aren't conflicts. There's always issues, even in the co-op and membership. If somebody wants to put in a new store near my market, what is my market? And so that issue will never go away. But a lot of the conflicts we take out of that equation because of the cooperative structure. We're privately held. The cooperative is privately held, 3,600 stockholders, so we don't have to deal with Wall Street. Now, is that good or is that bad? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of positive pressures that Wall Street puts on a company, and we talk about that at the board level a lot, whether we've got the correct pressures. The pressure in a co-op is coming more from the customer, from the retailer, and not from somebody looking strictly at the economics of the corporation and what's in the best interest of the corporation. So as a board member, you're thinking more that way, and yet there are the pressures from the retailer. So it's from the purest sense, maybe Wall Street can be more of a positive pressure than within the cooperative. From a negative sense, so I don't have to talk about what some of the negative issues would be with dealing with Wall Street. And nowadays, ACE used to be registered with the SEC until about 2 or 3 years ago, and we deregistered at that time. We did it voluntarily. We voluntarily were registered, but decided that obviously we just assume not share publicly the information about our company. That's one issue. But probably everybody in here is aware of Sarbanes-Oxley, and really that was the issue that pushed us to decide that we would deregister from the SEC, is because if we were going to comply with all that, the cost that it would put inside the co-op was probably not worth it for us. Now, the issue on the flip side of that is, but Sarbanes-Oxley does, in a lot of respects, drive good governance inside a company. So we nevertheless follow, and our legal department follows Sarbanes-Oxley very closely, and to make sure that we're not sacrificing some of the good governance practices that are there. I'm going to skip down here to the combination. The way that we think of ACE is kind of the optimal combination of leveraging the enterprise, leveraging the 4,600 retailers for the purpose of buying and all kind of different operational efficiencies, while at the same time, this point down here about the vision and mission, we believe that the reason that ACE competes today is because of the people in the store, and specifically because of the entrepreneur in the store, because of the owner in the store. That's, although companies can certainly create an ownership culture, even a publicly held company, and a lot of them do a great job at that. There's something about having everything on the line when you're in the store, and there's something about the way you personalize that store. It's part of who you are and what you're projecting to your community. And so the combination at ACE of having the leverage of the numbers combined with the passion, and what I put down here is the vision and the mission living in the store. In other words, the owner is living in that store, and it's going to be very clear to the people in the store what the vision, what the owner's vision is, and what the mission is. Now, in terms of a brand nationally, the challenge is to make sure that these visions and missions are consistent with what the corporation sees as the vision and the missions. Okay, let me move beyond history and want to talk just a minute about strategy. We had, it's been a few years ago, we had a gentleman by the name of Sid Doolittle come in to ACE, and our purpose was to look at the retail store model, to enhance some components in the model, to get some ideas. We ended up with a concept store that we tried out west, and basically took some components out of that, introduced it to other stores. But in our relationship with him, one of the things that we really liked is that he brought this retail strategy model to the table. It's very simple, it's very intuitive, and this actually just comes right off their website. And it characterizes, if you're in retail, you're going to occupy one of 5 positions if you want to compete long term. And I'll just, you can read them for yourself. Well, the most obvious, it's called the EST theory because cheapest, hottest, biggest, quickest, easiest. And we would put ourselves at ACE as the easiest. And the easiest is really all about service. You see that characterized up there in the light blue square. Um, Now, that's not to say that you can be easiest and that's all you have to be, because they would say that regardless of the strategy or the focus that you choose, you have got to be able to compete in these other areas too. For example, with ACE, we may be easiest, but if we can't compete on price, then we will end up taking ourselves out of the market. So again, I'll go back to, fortunately, nationwide, we've got the 4,600 stores and the leverage there. You can go around the circle, look at the other positions that you can take, and in every case, there are things that every competitor will do to try to occupy those. Since this is Atlanta, I'll just speak a minute about Home Depot and say that now in this model and on the website, they've got Home Depot down as being biggest is a position that they are occupying. And yet, it's very obvious that as savvy a retailer as they are, they understand the other positions as well, whether they think of it in terms of this model. But I'll just give you an example of quickest. One thing they did a few years ago was introduce the self-checkouts into our industry. They were the first in our industry to do that. Well, obviously, they understand that speed through the register is something that's important to the consumer. So you could argue, do they own other positions here or not? Regardless of what the outcome of that argument is, the fact is they understand these other positions too. Just like ACE, we understand we're not going to be a Walmart, but we have to be able to compete on price. We can't be out of bounds there. The same way with selection. No, we don't have the selection of a warehouse store, but in the categories in which we do have, we've got to make sure that we've got the proper selection there. Well, again, our positioning is all about service, and this is kind of the internal slogan that we use at ACE, the vision to be the most helpful hardware store on the planet. We've kind of expanded that recently, and you see at the bottom, and it's got the logo, it says the most helpful retail company on the planet. We don't really want to aspire just to only be the most helpful in our industry, but also to be the most helpful at retail. That's very important to us. The Dean mentioned earlier our slogan, and I guess I should correct, I hate to correct the Dean in front of this group here, but I'm going to have to correct you on that, Dean. It used to be, he was correct historically. ACE is a place with a helpful hardware man. But now, does anybody know how that slogan's changed? Yeah, we're the folks now, or the person. It's not the man. Back then, probably 90% of our customers were male, and nowadays 60 to 70% of our customers are male. But we didn't have to read those statistics to figure out 20 years ago that, you know what, saying man's probably not the right thing to say. So it's the helpful hardware person or the helpful hardware folks now. But we're all about helpful, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is what is helpful. And in the broadest sense of the word in terms of helpful is everything. I mean, you have to narrow that down. But helpful is having the product. Helpful is somebody comes in the store and never leaves without purchasing what they want. And yet our stores are 15,000 square feet. A warehouse store is 100,000. What are the odds you're going to get anything you want in our store versus 100,000 square footers? So in the broadest sense of the word, saying that you want to be helpful is not very helpful internally when you talk about it. So you got to kind of narrow down what does helpful mean to us. And really, it's it's the service component that we talk about continuously. And really more, it's about what the people add. And I know we all grow a little weary of hearing companies talk about the customer's number one and people are our most important asset. And so the last thing I want to do is to stand up here today and give you one of those cliches. But when you do take in that, in what we looked at earlier right there, when you take the position of service here, there's no doubt that people are a very important component. Now, I'm not going to say that, and what I've talked about really is the owner in that store is probably the most important component to us. But everybody in the store has got to be strong, or we've got to be, I can't say everybody, but we have got to be stronger on average than other people in our industry in terms of service. And that's all about people. So we do have to focus on the people component. And that starts with things like identifying who the ACE retailers are. and identifying that they have the right approach, that they understand about customer service. Again, they understand this concept of helpfulness. So people are critical in our business without being cliche about it, and relationships are critical. When we every 3 or 4 years we bring in some type of outside consulting group to talk with us about strategy. We happen to have an ongoing project right now with McKinsey and Company who are in. So I've got this survey that was just hot off the press just a few weeks ago, and I thought that I would just bring a few of the results. I don't want to make too global a statement about consultants. They're really smart people and really valuable to us, but a lot of what we hear is confirming what we kind of already know, but it really helps to have some of the data to support that. These are some conclusions that came out of the survey that as they survey 1,200 consumers across the country and look at how we compare versus others in our industry, these are examples of statements that ACE is very strong, well, is basically the strongest of any, again, by this survey, which is done internally, but we don't want somebody to tell us, we want the facts, so I'm going to say it's objective. But these are statements that we were the strongest on in the industry. You can read those. Not surprising if you want to be helpful, if your strength is relationships and your strength is service, you better do a pretty good job on these things. But back to the point about people, you see right there, most knowledgeable personnel, employees make helpful suggestions for the right products, and employees, again mentioned right there, really know the products. Now, for those of you who shopped in an Ace Hardware store, you have probably found situations where these don't always hold, and so I don't want to stand up here and suggest that we're perfect on any of these. This is just compared to others in the industry. These are some of our strongest suit. We were at dinner last night, and Marty, where's Marty? Marty's over here. Marty was sharing a story. One of the things I love about being with Ace Hardware is that people like to come up to you and tell you stories about what happened in the store. So Marty, she did that for me last night. I didn't even prompt her. She just started telling her Ace Hardware story. And she was talking about something that she had. She came into an Ace store and she needed some help with it. They needed a little gadget to make this happen. And so the guy thinks about it. He goes to these drawers and pulls out just the right little gadget. And he apologetically told her it was $1 for that gadget. And so she said, "I'll take 12." That is very important to our positioning in the industry. The problem with that is that, and part of the strategy that we always have to be very concerned about is, how do we translate that experience, which obviously, taken to the nth degree, if that's all that we do, we won't be around very long, because there is not, the economics don't work for that. And so back to the relationship, one of the things that ACE is generally good at is building relationships with customers, and it's taking the time and having the hard-to-find items like that and being able to spend some time with a customer that we hope translates into a relationship. Now, all of us know that sometimes relationships like that don't work out, and we spend that time and it's gone, and we sell you 3 screws and get 15 cents for it, and that's the best we're going to do. All retailers face that. We run ads and we sell items at cost. Some people come in and buy the items at cost, and we don't see them again until we sell the next items at cost. And so we understand the downside of that, but the important thing, and part of the retail strategy issue for us, is how do we leverage the relationship? How do we do the small things that don't make economic sense that leads to the relationships that make all the sense in the world, and that really, without the relationships, we don't have a very strong position in the market. So that's very critical. So I love to hear those stories, and it means we're absolutely doing the right thing. But corporately and at the stores, we have to continually think about how do we build on that to maintain a position in the market. One thing that I find is, I talked about the 162 new stores that'll be out there this year. We'll have 190 stores that will open next year. Depending on where you grew up, most people associate ACE with their local market and where they shop, and don't have a full understanding of the brand nationally. And I wanted to just flip up a few pictures of some stores that have been opened in the last 3 or 4 years. There are some new stores relatively new stores in the Atlanta market, although Atlanta is a fairly mature market for ACE, so you don't see a lot of growth in new stores here. I'm going to digress just a minute at something that I think is interesting about ACE 2, and I'll get right back to the stores, and I'm going to conclude in about 3 minutes. ACE, 20 years ago, opened its first corporate store, and ran the store for a year or two, lost a lot of money, and decided that, it really makes sense for these ACE retailers to be doing this, and we'll keep doing what we do really well. Then about 7 or 8 years ago, we decided, we're smarter nowadays, and we're doing a better job of listening to retailers, and we're really more a retail company now. We're not a distributor as much anymore. We're focused on retail, so we're going to open corporate stores again. So in the last few years, we've opened about 30 corporate stores, including in Atlanta. Atlanta was one of about 5 markets that we opened corporate stores in. And I'm pleased to say that this year we will be selling the last of those to ACE retailers. We kind of learned that lesson the second time around, that we don't, it really reinforces what we believe, and that is the owner in the store is a lot of the power inside that store. But we thought, what, we're smarter nowadays, so we're going to try it again. It's probably a good thing that we did because it validated our position in the market. But we sold the last of those stores, but 4 or 5 of those stores, maybe 6, were actually in Atlanta, and those were transitioned over to other ACE retailers by and large. I think we may have closed one of the stores in Atlanta. But anyway, we learned that lesson about about corporate stores, and another way that I think it's validated, one thing that I think it's been this year in the news, in the Wall Street Journal, McDonald's experience, there is, I don't know if it's a private equity person or a Wall Street analyst or who it was, but was really giving McDonald's a lot of heat about their corporate stores and saying, you know what, you guys need to close these corporate stores and you need to get them in the hands of the franchisees, because if you look at the return on investment from a corporate store versus a franchisee, the franchisees are kicking you guys, so you need to get out of it. And, that was music to my ears. I read that and say, at least that analyst believes the same thing that we believe at ACE. You need to get the stores in the hands of the people who live in the community, who've got skin in the game, and who are really passionate about it. And again, that is no indictment of any other company who don't have owners in the store. I'm just saying that's what works for us. That's what we believe. A few stores. So I want to show you a few pictures, and I'll conclude. This is a store in Jacksonville, Florida. A chain. They're a chain of about 10 stores. This store was opened about 5 years ago. I'm sorry I don't have the whole picture. I absolutely love this store. They've got a huge nursery and a great position, a very high volume ACE store, and they do a fantastic job. A number of new stores are out in the Southwest, and this is an example. You can tell by the terrain there. One thing that I'm showing a little bit is the flavor of the entrepreneur in the store a lot of times is demonstrated in the front elevation of that store. Now, I could show you pictures inside the store, but even with a trained eye like myself, they all start looking alike after a while. But I'll just kind of, you can take my word for the fact that these stores are clean and fresh, and they look pretty good inside. And I think the exterior is some evidence of that. There's a store, I believe that one's out in the Denver area. This is actually a retrofitted store. That there was a box, you can kind of see the evidence of the old concrete box, and then they came in and basically upgraded and mountainized that store, again, to make it fit in the community, and it's really I guess, an evidence of the owner and what he thinks. There's a store that's in actually a large suburban market. Sorry for the fuzziness of that image. That's a store in Tennessee that's actually about 25 years old. That's an old building, but was recently refaced. That store's in the Midwest. Again, just looking at the different designs that you can find all kind of designs of ACE store. This store is actually a store that's on a mountain, and that was, you can see the pitched roof. Some of that was driven by the community, and some of that's also to fit in the community and what they wanted more of a residential look up on the mountain, and so that design was to fit there. Another store from the Southwest, you can see the stone, and I love this the tan fencing that they've used over here, and how it just how they've tied in all the colors. Again, although there is support corporately from Chicago to help design things like this, it really is an outgrowth of the owner of the stores. And that's a more typical store nowadays. I think this one is freestanding, although this would not be unlike the look of some stores that you might find in strip shopping centers. Yeah, I'm gonna. Oh, okay. That was the last of the pictures that I had there. I could go on and show you from large, more commercial-looking stores to very consumer-friendly looking stores, but there's a wide variety. And I personally, and I know Ace retailers are very proud of how we customize these stores, how we customize helpfulness in the communities, and at the same time understanding that we're not perfect. One of the things about helpful, and I'll conclude on this comment, is being helpful is really about two things. Being helpful is about how do you operationalize helpful? How do you ensure that there's a system that to some degree guarantees that we can be helpful consistently? And we always struggle with that. I think every firm struggles with that to some degree. So how do you operationalize helpful? And number two is how do you create the culture that supports helpfulness for things that can't be operationalized? I mean, there's so many different, you all know, so many different scenarios and service situations that there's not going to be a policy for it, procedure, or best practice. So the culture has to support it. And that gets all the way back to the owner in the store. And we believe the culture is really the foundation for our future. And we're very confident in that. And we have high expectations for continued growth. And I appreciate being with you here today. Mark Rick did send this up to me, so I wanted to share this with you right before I got out. So how about them helpful hardware folks? It's a pleasure to talk to you today. I love talking about ACE, and thank you for your patience and hearing a little bit more about ACE probably than you've ever heard. Thanks. And Dean, thank you for having me. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, we take a few questions, and I think, as you know, we are taping this. It will be archived on our website and available probably by noon tomorrow. And Griff, how are you doing this morning? Tom's brother Griff is with us also today. So we've got a microphone we'd like you to use. Bill?
Right. As I understand it, the local stores are basically locally owned, and that you said that you divide the profit, that your company is the central purchaser. How do you determine the division of profit between your company and the local owner?
First of all, we like to say ACE is a cost to serve. When you talk about the corporate entity, we are a cost to serve operation, although there is some margin built in to have a profit at the end of the year and to provide some capital for the corporation as we grow. But most of the profit is at retail, and primarily the way we divide it is based on purchases through the ACE hardware system. And that's a combination of purchases from the warehouses as well as purchases from ACE vendors. So at the end of the year, if you and I are the two members of the cooperative and you buy $1 million and I buy $9 million from ACE, I get 90% of the profit of ACE Hardware Corporation. Whatever that profit is, whether it's $1 or it's $100,000, I get 90% of it. So that's what drives the division of the profit.
Do you have access to the books of the local owner?
That goes back to membership agreements. We have access to the books to new members. We don't necessarily to old members unless they volunteer. But we do not take their profit. What I'm saying is ACE, for services and for handling the goods through the warehouse, charge X dollars. And there is an intentional margin in what we're charging. So at the end of the year, we will have the profit at the corporation, and then we divide that profit. I'm not saying it's kind of irrelevant what the retailer makes because we're not taking any of their profit. They're going to keep the profit that they generate in store. But the margin that's built into the corporation, we divide that margin up and then use some of it for capital and equity in the corporation, and about half of it we send back to the retailers, and we divide that up based on purchases. But we do not, just to be very clear, we don't take the aggregate profit of all the retailers in a pool and then split it up among the retailers.
Just curious to know how you divide it.
Yep.
You get your profit, how do you determine what you keep and what you give to the local
again, the local owner will have a profit at the end of the day, and we will have a profit. He will retain his profit. The corporation will split the profit that actually resides in the corporation based on purchases. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to have different pricing within different geographic areas? Seems like I shop at the Ace on Howell Mill sometimes, I shop at the one in Northside, and I notice a difference in some of the pricing.
If you go to McDonald's, like us, they cannot impose pricing, although they understand, a McDonald's retailer understands it's in their best interest to have basically uniform pricing. But my understanding is McDonald's cannot mandate a retail price. Ace cannot mandate a retail price to Ace retailers. We do have, and in the last few years, retail pricing has been a big issue with Ace. Lots of research, lots of technology. We match up by barcodes with other retailers who have their prices out there that we get compared to where we are. We have a somewhat of a suggested retail. We've actually got some different schedules of pricing that a retailer can choose. But at the end of the day, a retailer can say, I'm not doing any of the Ace retail pricing. This is my price. Now, I would say probably that 70 to 80% of Ace retailers probably choose that the Ace retail suggested one specific level of pricing they do choose. But I'm not surprised at what you're saying. To a large extent, if stores are owned by, if there's one owner for multiple stores, just for simplification, a lot of times the retails are the same if it has the same ownership. And now that brings a point I just, real briefly, there are 3,500 stockholders, there are 4,600 stores. That math's pretty easy. What that does mean is most Ace retailers are single store operators. There are some of us who have multiple stores. Obviously, you get into multiple stores and you get into the risk that that owner in the store is diluted to some degree. So we kind of watch that, and there's ways that we measure how a store is doing with its helpfulness. The model that I like, again, here to Atlanta, and I love Chick-fil-A. I love to eat Chick-fil-A. My kids love Chick-fil-A. But they have historically been, I forget what they call, owner-operators, I think it's what they call their people, and they have historically been one owner-operator per store. My understanding is they're experimenting a little bit now with maybe a couple of stores or maybe 3 stores, but so that validates that they kind of believe the same thing we do. You have to be careful about multi-store. But yes, there is some differences in pricing. I think in the future you'll find that retail prices will converge even more than they are today. You'll find less of that, but that is true. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? I have a 2-part question. It
Okay.
has to do with how you compete today versus how you used to. With the advent of the warehouse stores over the last 2 or 3 decades, you must be feeling like you're in a really different competitive environment. If you give advice to somebody who's thinking about opening up a new Ace store, what is your advice about how close a Lowe's or Home Depot can be and you can still make money, and how do you make sure that they still have a niche in that community that they can make money? So the second part of my question is, are there certain product lines that you're feeling like are, help balance out the 15 cents for the 3 screws and a lot of service, that you're able to say to a retailer, this is a place you can really make money. If you can just keep on focusing on this, it's going to be your balancing the 15-cent screws.
Well, I guess the first part of your question, I would say that the last time I checked, Lowe's and Home Depot don't have any plans to quit opening stores. So we better be able to compete with them close by. And so in relation to, there are some rules of thumb that we use in terms of locating. Of course, sometimes we're already there and they come, so we don't have the luxury of, we really kind of like the luxury of knowing where they are and positioning strategically based on that. But the fact that they're going to keep adding stores means that we better have a model that works almost regardless of where they are. Or if we don't have a model that we think works, and arguably there are a multitude of models, if we don't have a model that will not work right across the street from them, then we better have the flexibility in the location to reposition in the event that they get in a position that we're not very strategic at. But ultimately, and really part of the McKinsey study is, let's continue to look, and we've challenged them to help us continue to look at the model And we want to make sure that regardless of where the Home Depot or Lowe's are, and there are other Menards or regional players as well, that we can still, that there is a reason for the consumer to shop with us. And I'll say this too, it would probably be hard for us to find a customer in an Ace store that isn't also a Home Depot or a Lowe's shopper. I mean, there are different occasions to shop an Ace store versus shop a Home Depot or a Lowe's. So we understand that, and you know, that's good for us. I mean, we like that. I mean, if it was either Ace or Home Depot, that would probably concern us a lot. But we coexist, and we believe we can even strengthen our position more. Now, you asked me a question about what categories. When you get ready to sign up for that new store, I'll give you more insight about the categories. But I won't talk about categories in front of a general audience about what we're strong in and what we need to work on and things like that. So with all due respect, I'll pass on that question. But we see a very bright future. We're not perfect, and there's still a lot that we're working on. But again, I'll just go back. Home Depot and Lowe's, tremendously successful. We have great respect for them. We've been on their coattails a little bit and learned a lot for what they've done, and we know that we'll always have to compete with them. Now, some of our stores, again, there's a variety in stores. Some of the stores that I showed up here, does it matter where Home Depot and Lowe's are located? Yes. It would affect the return on the investment in those stores, but those stores are still going to pass their hurdle rate for the return on investment, really regardless of where Home Depot and Lowe's are. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you comment on internet sales and how does that impact the corporate versus individual owners?
Okay. We do a really bad job with internet sales, so just to be frank about that. And I'll tell you the reason, and I'll be brief, Dean. The reason is because there is an inherent conflict in the cooperative with internet sales. Most retailers understand when it's all owned, when one company owns all the retail staff, they understand we've got to be in all these different areas, we've got to be in all these different channels, and it's best for our customer to do that. And we're not worried about if we're going to cannibalize sales from the retail store. In the cooperative, that's a little bit more of an uphill battle because an Ace retailer is sitting out there saying, why are you offering that? And again, in our franchise type structure, what price are you putting on that? I'm a different price, and my Ace neighbor down here is a different price. You're putting something on the internet cheaper than I've got in the store, and that makes me look bad if the customer comes in and says, just like this gentleman, why are you different prices? What are you guys trying to pull here? It's just kind of the way that we operate. So that makes it difficult. We understand though that channel, we will have to break through that culture issue. We like to cite numbers like, our internet sales grew 300%. They're growing 300% this year. But again, I won't really tell you the number, but the number's pretty pathetic. So it's pretty easy to grow 300% when you're where we are. I mean, we don't compare to where others are in our industry. They do a much better job on internet sales. We've got to break through that, but we don't. We do a very good job in terms of getting the product to the customer. Like most retailers, we'll send it to the store, we'll send it to your house. We've got the distribution centers that make that supply chain very quick for the customers. So we're really set up to do internet sales very effectively, but we've got a little cultural issue there that we continue to work with. Okay, thanks, Dean. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Tom, thank you for being here and for sharing some of the history of ACE and telling us a little bit about the business model, and we'll talk about the categories later. Okay. I certainly would like to, again, thank you, and we want to offer you a small token of thanks. Tom, can you come up? This, I guess, is a pièce de résistance. This is a can of paint. You know what this is?
Oh, yeah.
It's a little light for a can of paint.
This is from Home Depot.
The colors are pretty good. Actually, it's a golf shirt. It's a sort of a one-of-a-kind golf shirt. Only people who have spoken at this event have this. I don't even have one. So it's a special shirt just for you. Plus, we've got a piece of glass artwork done by Paul Benzunas. We hope this will also be something you can enjoy in years ahead and think about this day.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to remind you that we do validate your parking if you brought your ticket with you. If you didn't bring your ticket with you, you just simply say Terry Third Thursday to the person on the way out, and they'll let you go free on your way. You won't have to stick around. Also want to remind you next month we will have Bertus Downs with us, the legal counsel for REM. I hope you will make that event. We are adjourned.